On episode 322 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Darin Ingles and discuss his book, The Lyme Solution, a 5-part plan to fight the inflammatory autoimmune response and beat Lyme disease. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/322. Our sponsor for this episode is Teamy Blends. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/T to meet this sponsor. They sent me kind of a gift pack to introduce them to me. And so, again, I'm not going to talk to you about a product that I haven't tried yet. And I am trying, at least for the past week, I've been drinking their Teamy Skinny, which is a blend where they've put yerba mate with oolong tea, along with some ginger root and some lime leaf extract, among some other things. It's all plant-based. I haven't had yerba mate in a number of years. I drank some of it when I was down in South America and Argentina. I actually bought a bunch of it and brought it back home. But I've been out of it for a number of years. So kind of getting back into it, I remember now why I enjoyed it so much that I was willing to buy a big bag of it and carry it home, is that it's got this kind of real mellow caffeine effect where when you drink it, you don't really get that huge boost. You feel it, but you don't really ever come off of it like, crash. There's no crash at the end. It's just sort of this mellow. And so kind of sipping on it over the course of a morning, really, really nice replacement for coffee, because it's just not that big spike up and then you got to have another coffee to kind of carry that through. It's just a really nice kind of gentle feeling over the course of the morning, and it is something that I feel like I can take and drink a little bit of it in the afternoon, which I would never try with coffee. Even though I'm a really good metabolizer of caffeine, I don't think I could do, and I can't do a coffee in the afternoon unless I expect to stay up later. With this, I can kind of sip on it, and if I last me into the afternoon a little bit, that's not so much of a problem. It's all plant-based. It's all natural. It's really, 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 really cool. I enjoy the flavor of it more than anything else. It's just got this really mellow, you can taste the lime a little bit. It's a little bit sweetened, so I don't even have to add any sweetener. They say you can add lemon or honey, but honestly, it doesn't need that. My taste buds being what they are, it's perfectly sweet enough for me. So go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/T and use the coupon code 40plus. That's 40PLUS. That's going to give you 15% off a purchase of $30 or more. This is really, really high quality tea. It's a really nice blend. As they say it in their slogan, it's not just tea, it's a lifestyle. And I kind of get that. You get to their website and they are kind of a little bit crazy about tea and tea related products. So go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/T and support the sponsor and support the podcast. Thank you. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Hello, and thank you for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. Our guest today is a respected leader in natural medicine with numerous publications, international lectures, and more than 26 years of experience in the healthcare field. His practice focuses on chronic immune disorders, including Lyme disease, autism, allergies, asthma, recurrent or persistent infections, and other immune problems. He uses diet, nutrients, herbs, homeopathy, and immunology to help his patients achieve better health. He is Dr. Darin Ingles. So Dr. Ingles, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Oh, thanks for having me, Alan.
The book, The Lyme Solution, I admitted this offline to you, and I guess I'll go ahead and make this admission now. I have zero experience with Lyme disease. I've never known anybody that's had it personally. I've never seen anyone that's experienced it. So I was coming from a position of complete ignorance, if you will. But it's kind of one of those, but I think that's really important because as it gets warm and, I want my clients out and about. I want you out there getting into nature. I want you moving around. I want you experiencing nature, getting the sunshine, enjoying the outdoors. That's a big function of health. At the same time, there is an exposure out there, and without really fully understanding the nature of that exposure, it's the scary thing. What if I get bit by a tick? what happens then?
Right.
So I do think it's a valuable conversation to have, or at least a good knowledge base to have, even if you've never experienced it and hopefully never will. But if you, I mean, I think that's coming from my point is it was really good to understand, okay, there is a risk when I get outside. And, I can put those in numerical
Right.
context of, I think you said there were 300,000 cases per year of Lyme's disease, which seems like a lot. But, when you figure there's 360 plus million people in the United States, it's not a huge number. But those that are affected are really, really, I mean, many of them in really, really bad shape. So again, it's really just kind of a good overall primer and education to understand there is a risk and kind of what to look for, which I think is probably the more important thing.
Right. Well, Lyme disease has really become epidemic, not just in the United States, but really around the world. And as you mentioned, we have about 300,000 new cases that are reported. And most of us who are in this world would argue that that's grossly underreported. And, we don't know what that true number is, but, consider it's probably, 500,000 people or more. And remember, that's every year. So as you start stratifying that over the course of a decade, we're now talking millions and millions of people dealing with, chronic Lyme disease. So, it's just become one of these things that, particularly for people who are really enjoy being outdoors, we know that the New England and the central part of the U.S. are really areas that tend to be endemic for Lyme. But really, Lyme disease has been reported in every state in the country. So whether you live in, Washington State or Arizona or Texas and places that we don't typically think of Lyme disease as being as problematic, in reality, it is possible. And I think, people who spend a lot of time outdoors have to be very vigilant about protecting themselves against ticks because they are out there. And, for some people can become very, damaging long term.
Yeah, I know. My wife. She's the worrier of the two. One of us has to do it, I guess. And so yeah, she's constantly worried, about tick bites and things like that when we're outdoors. I have a property about 7 acres out here, and I'll get out there in the bush of it and be cleaning it up. And she's like, check your body for ticks. Check your body for ticks. And I do. I guess that's one of the things I kind of came to learn from your book is that the deer tick that we're talking about is actually not the tick I'm used to dealing with in the Southeast as often. The ticks we're dealing with are a little bit bigger than this deer tick. The deer tick would actually be much, much smaller, which is something I didn't know. So I guess let's take a step back. And, things I knew was Lyme disease was an autoimmune disease. I knew that it was passed by certain ticks. I knew about the potential of a bullseye type, mark on where you got bit, those types of things. But could you just take a step back and kind of tell us what is Lyme disease? How does it get spread, and how do we contract it? I think is just a start to kind of really get us going in this conversation.
Disease is actually a bacterial infection, and it's transmitted primarily through a tick bite. And as you mentioned, it's mostly through the bite of a deer tick. However, these ticks can transmit other types of bacteria and viruses independent of Lyme. So we know up in New England, where I spend part of my time, 30+% of the ticks up there carry Lyme disease plus something else. So there's an additional risk of getting some other illness that's not Lyme disease that you can get through those tick bites. So, down in the Southeast where the deer ticks aren't as endemic, there are other types of ticks. There's the dog tick or the wood tick. And as you migrate over towards, Texas, there's the Lone Star tick. And all these ticks, can transmit various types of infections, some of which are Lyme, others which are something else. But when people get exposed to these ticks, and if it has transmitted that bacteria, you can basically feel flu-like. And a lot of people, when they experiencing symptoms, they get a headache and joint pain, and they get the body aches. They might spike a fever and chills. It's a kind of a nondescript illness, and often it gets passed off as that you got a virus or some other kind of bug running through you, and hopefully it will pass. But that bullseye rash that you mentioned is sort of the telltale sign that if you see it, there really is nothing else that we know of that causes that kind of rash. So that's very stereotypical for Lyme disease. Unfortunately, when you look at the research, we know that maybe 40% or less of people who get bit by a tick that carries Lyme actually gets that rash. So the lack of the rash certainly doesn't tell us about whether you do or do not have Lyme disease. But I think, one of the characteristic things we also see in Lyme that's very unusual is what we call migratory joint pain. And what this means is one day your right shoulder hurts, and the next day it's your left knee, and then the next day it's your right ankle. When you start getting this pain syndrome that seems to vary from joint to joint, body part to body part, again, there's nothing really else that looks like that other than Lyme. So the deer tick is still the biggest transmitter of Lyme disease. There's some information out of Europe that suggests that perhaps even mosquitoes and fleas may transmit Lyme, and that might make sense in that I see a lot of patients who live in areas that aren't known for having Lyme disease that actually have Lyme disease. So perhaps there's another insect vector that's spreading it. But again, as of now, when you look at the statistics, New England and the central Midwest are really the big endemic parts of Lyme.
Yeah. And I guess that's one of the hard parts of this is, you may think that you're just kind of getting a spring or a fall flu. Or, you might be thinking, well, my joints hurt because of the weather. It's getting a little moist out. There's probably going to rain tomorrow. These kind of things as we get a little older. There are the aches and pains. And, we've gone through enough flus to say, okay, this is a flu and, it goes away in a few days and then I'll be fine. And if I'm not okay on Monday, I'll go to the doctor and, he can give me a shot or give me an antibiotic or whatever he wants to do. So Lyme disease often kind of gets missed. And I know that you in the book you put a quiz that can kind of take us through a series of questions that if we get to the end of that and we score better than I think it was 45 on this particular quiz, it's very likely that we do have Lyme disease. It can be confirmed with some tests, but I've gone over things in here, with the podcast before. We talked about acute and chronic, so I'll just quickly go through. Acute is something that's like right there. You something happened and you know it happened, and here's the event. You can actually point to it. Chronic is when something kind of sticks around for a while, and you might not even know when the actual event, so to speak, occurred. It's just continuing illness or continuing problem. And so you've identified acute and chronic with regards to Lyme disease. Can you talk a little bit about what those differentials are of how it's acute versus chronic and what the basis is? And then what are some of the symptoms that we would look for on the basis of whether we're dealing with something that's immediate like acute or something that's a little bit more long-term like chronic?
Yeah, well, in acute Lyme disease, as I mentioned, you feel really ill, and it's like if you had any other type of infection. As I mentioned, you can get a high fever and swollen glands and chills and the body aches and the joint pain. You can get a headache. You can get back pain. You just feel like you got a bug, and it often will knock people down for a handful of days. I think the big difference, when you get a virus, when you get a cold, things like that, you might be sick for a few days to a week, maybe 10 days. And then, it seems to resolve on its own, or maybe you've gone to your doctor and got a prescription for antibiotics and that cleared it up and you feel fine. What happens in Lyme disease, though, is often that, you might feel a little better or you don't feel any better at all. And you start getting into 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month or longer and really not feeling well. And as it kind of migrates out of that acute phase into a chronic phase, what we really start to see are more neurological symptoms. And so people will complain of this condition called neuropathy, where you get numbness and tingling in your hands and your feet and other places on your skin. People will describe these sensory distortions where, you'll feel like a burning in the skin, and you look at the skin and it looks completely normal and pink. People complain of feeling clumsy, they trip a lot, they drop things a lot, they start having memory problems, cognitive impairment, short-term memory loss. All of these various neurological symptoms can be a sign that, you've sort of gone out of that acute infection stage, and now it's becoming more of this autoimmune kind of problem. And we've got some pretty good evidence in the literature that Lyme has the capacity to trigger your immune system in a way that it starts making antibodies against your own neurological tissue, your brain. And that inflammation in the brain can really start to cause a lot of these, various neurological symptoms. It's kind of interesting when you look at all of the symptoms that have been associated with Lyme disease. There's almost 100 symptoms. It's really pretty varied. And we call Lyme the great imitator or the great mimic, just because, again, it looks like so many different things. And that's why, when I have people who come into my office who've had they've basically been sick for, weeks and months on end, and they've been tested, 20 ways Sunday and can't seem to find an explanation of why they feel the way they feel. Lyme's always something that's on my mind because, it is one of the few things out there that can cause this really sort of long-term illness, particularly when we hear about a lot of, joint and muscle problems and the neurological symptoms.
Just a quick word from our sponsor. This podcast is sponsored by Teamy Blends. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/T. Use the coupon code 40plus to get 15% off an order of $30 or more. Please support our sponsors. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/T. I think the thing that's really kind of struck me with all of this is as I was going through the reading, there's a theory about mitochondria that it was basically at one point a separate bacteria that kind of moved into our system and kind of became a part of humans and animals over time. And it really seems like, Lyme kind of has a little bit of that maybe nature to itself that it's somewhat trying to take over us as an organism. It's actually very, very smart. I mean, I guess maybe not intelligent, so to speak, but the way it works and the things that it does make it very hard to, one, diagnose and two, to actually get rid of.
Yeah, Lyme is really the ultimate shapeshifter. It's characteristics where, for people who don't know, Lyme is what's called a spirochete. It's if you look at it under a microscope, most bacteria are kind of like little balls or the kind of these rod-shaped organisms. Well, spirochete is a very long corkscrew-shaped organism. And even though it's technically a bacteria, it actually behaves more like a virus. And therefore, it can penetrate tissues, it can penetrate cells, and it can literally ball itself up so that the immune system essentially can't identify it. And I think part of the reason that people end up with the chronic Lyme is that this organism will change its shape, hide from the immune system, so the immune system just doesn't get rid of it the way it should, and it kind of hides in the corners of the body where the immune system's either not looking, or if it gets inside your cell, the immune system can't see at all. And then, given the right set of circumstances, it starts to rear its ugly head again and uncoils itself, and then it becomes more problematic, and then can continue to stimulate more inflammation. So, it's a very, like I said, it's a very clever organism. And out of all of the, bacteria and viruses that I know of, I think it's the one that has the greatest capacity to evade the immune system.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important to emphasize is that we need our immune system to basically deal with this. I mean, initially, if I think you said within the first 72 hours, maybe some antibiotics would be able to knock it out. But once it's gotten embedded, once it's kind of done its thing and it's in your body and it's replicated to a point where it's got its fountainhead, it's got its foothold in you. At that point, you really need your immune system to fight this because just dealing with antibiotics for, month after month, year after year, really isn't a practical solution. But your book does actually provide some practical solutions. And one of the things I really liked about the way you put this out there was a lot of the things that you're talking about in your, what you call the 5 stages of immune boosting plan. Those stages are actually probably just things we should do getting ready for cold and flu season, getting ready for, any other thing that we're going to do. We need our immune system to protect us. That's what it is. It starts with the gut and everything else. But the reality is, these are practical tips that you can use even if you don't have Lyme disease. It's just going to make you healthier overall. So, do you mind going through the 5 stages of your immune boosting plan?
Sure. And the first step is really about gut health. What we know from, science is that 80% of your immune system really, so if there's anything in your gut's not functioning well, it's just harder for your immune system to function well. And so many people I work with that have chronic Lyme have a history of chronic gastrointestinal problems. And whether it's, constipation, diarrhea, gas, bloating, there's usually some element that, something in that system hasn't been working well. So I can imagine for a lot of people, they already had an underlying gut problem, and then they got bit by the tick that carried Lyme, and that just sort of went from bad to worse. So the stage was already kind of set to start having, immune problems. So we really talk a lot about how to repair the gut, how to restore it. And certainly for anyone who's been on antibiotics, perhaps for, sinus infections, bronchitis, pneumonia. Every time you take an antibiotic, you start eradicating a lot of your normal bacteria. And there's just so much research coming out about how important your normal microbiome is, your normal bacteria for maintaining so much of your good health. And it's tied into weight metabolism, mood, of course, all the gastrointestinal issues. So really a critical part of having a healthy immune system. So I really walk you through, certain nutrients that can really help repair the gut. So I talk about specifically probiotics and their health benefits. Having the right strains at the right amount is very important. Again, particularly for people who've already been on antibiotics. We can talk about things like, glutamine and digestive enzymes that can help your body break down the food and make sure you're absorbing it the way you should. So it really is about kind of looking at what specifically for you may not be functioning as well as it could in the gut, and then helping repair that. And then the second step of the plan is really about diet. And, I had Lyme disease myself. I mean, that's really why I wrote this book. So I've tried various diets for myself and with my patients. And what I really found is what we call an alkaline diet seems to work best. And what I like about it is that it's really geared on eating foods that help keep inflammation down in your body, because ultimately it's the inflammation that people really feel, and that's what triggers a lot of the symptoms. So in a nutshell, what an alkaline diet entails is eating a mostly vegetarian diet where we try and limit animal protein and fruits to about 20% of your total dietary intake. And then we eliminate really any junk food, processed food, dairy products, and coffee. These are foods that tend to be very acid forming in the body and therefore are more prone to stimulate inflammation. So if we can, again, control it that way, it just helps reduce inflammation in the gut and potentially in the joints and the brain and elsewhere in the body. The coffee is the one that people will always, kind of sneer at me when I say that. And I love coffee, but, I found for myself that, even a sip of coffee, my neuropathy would get a lot worse. So I know people say, well, it's just a little bit, that's okay. But, even for some people, that little bit can be a bit too much. So when people are really starting any kind of diet change, I really recommend just follow it 100%. That way you can really feel the full impact of what that diet's doing for your body. And like I said, what I like about it is
and I think that's a really important thing is, there's a big push out there, and let's do 80-20. If you're doing it right 80% of the time, you're going to be fine. And I would say, yeah, you're going to be fine about 80% of the time. If you're dealing with something, like we're a lot of folks that'll listen to the podcast, they're wanting to lose weight. And I'm like, well, okay, you're not in that 80% of your time right now. You're in that 20%. So we got to ratchet down on things a little bit until we can find the balance. And when we find that balance, we're there. And you're talking about a similar situation. We're dealing with a disease here that can really wreck us if we don't take care of it. So this is not the time to be thinking about justifying or trying to get to a point where we're saying, okay, but it's okay because everybody else is doing it kind of mindset. It's like not everybody else right now is dealing with Lyme disease. And if you want to get past this, you want to fix yourself, then you have to make these tough choices, and you're not going to like it, but again, it might not be permanent, and you'll get back into that point where you can be the 80-20, and everything will be cool. But we're talking about it, actually trying to fix a disease, and so taking that time right now to follow this anti-inflammatory type of eating is going to improve your overall health and put you in a better position to fight this bug.
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about choices, and when you're not feeling well, you have a choice to make the change or not. But when people do make those choices, they feel a lot better faster. And again, as you get to a point where you're feeling better, you can be more liberal with the diet. But when you're really feeling horrible and tired and achy, it's better just to toe the line and follow the program, and you'll feel much better faster. So, yeah, and then the third step of the plan is really about treating the active infection. So I walk you through a series of herbal protocols that I personally use and what I've used on thousands of Lyme patients. And again, it's different than just taking antibiotics, where the antibiotics are really geared to just killing the bug. Herbal protocols not only will help eradicate the bug, but will also work on everything else that Lyme does to your body. So a lot of these herbs are anti-inflammatory. They help improve circulation. They help boost your immune system. They're nutritive to your gut. So we're really encompassing encompassing a much broader scope of what Lyme has done to your body than just eradicating the organism. Plus, we don't get all the negative side effects that you typically get when you're on antibiotics long term. People don't generally get diarrhea. They don't get, this infection called Clostridia difficile, which can happen. So all those negative kind of things that we tend to see with long-term antibiotics, we don't see with the herbs. So again, there's a lot of different herbal protocols out there. I kind of highlight the ones that I've seen the best success with. And again, people can get those herbs online, the dosing's on there, exactly how much to take, what to take. And my recommendation always is when you start on herbs, 6 to 8 weeks on each protocol to really give it a fair shake. And if you get to a point where you really aren't feeling any different, then it's time to move on to the next protocol. So that's really all outlined in the third step. And then the fourth step is really about environment.
I'm sorry, I like how you prioritize them too. You put and said, okay, this one's the one that I've found to be the most effective for the most people. And then you kind of say, okay, if that one doesn't work, you can step these other down, because some of them are you say they're relatively intense. The dosing and what you're doing are a little bit tougher to handle, but so you're trying to start someone out at one that you've seen good results with, that you feel is the best for the most number of people. And I just kind of like the fact that you've organized it in a way that just gives them that kind of information, because, so many times it's like, well, try this protocol. And it's like, well, that didn't work. And it's like, okay, we'll try this one. And it sounds like you're throwing things at it, whereas you actually take the time to describe all of them and explain why you've put one protocol in front of another.
Yeah, well, I said it's just been my own personal experience and what I've seen, with thousands of patients, that, this is the hierarchy in which I've seen the best results with the least side effects. But, if that's not working for you, here's, plan B. And, there are some people who just happen to do better on one protocol over another for no real logical reason. But, you do have to give it a fair shake. You do have to give it enough time to really do what we want it to do. But, at some point you have to draw a line in the sand. And if it's not working, great, time to move on to the next one. Yeah, so the fourth step of the plan is really about environmental control. And I think, we all get exposed to so many different things in the environment that undermine our immune system. The average American gets exposed to over 80,000 chemicals a year. And all of that, is potentially damaging, to your immune system and perhaps, other body systems. So, there's a lot of this stuff that you can do at home. You can control what you use in your home. And this includes things like, Windex and Tilex and 409 and lawn care products and pesticides, herbicides, all of that stuff, can have a cumulative effect on your body. And we know a lot of these chemicals get stored in our fat cells. So I do talk a little bit about, ways to detoxify your body to help eliminate those, to reduce your body burden, but certainly anything that you can control at home. Stop using these products, stop buying these products. That just lowers the burden on your body and potentially on your immune system. And one of the big things I highlight in that section is about mold. And again, depending on where you live in the country, where I am in the Northeast, mold is a huge problem. Most people have a lot of exposure, whether it's in their home, their school, or their work environment. And mold toxicity is probably the one thing that mimics Lyme disease the most. And when I've been working with patients for a while and we've been doing their Lyme treatment and we're not seeing the kind of success we'd like, mold is always the next thing on my list that we need to examine. So I recommend, again, if you live most of the country, that gets humidity or moisture, it's a good idea to have your home tested. Make sure you don't have any kind of hidden mold. You don't have to see mold to have a problem. Most people who have these issues don't know that it's there, which is why it's a problem. Unless it peeks through your drywall and you see water stains, you would have no idea. But boy, sometimes you can get just a little pinhole leak in your roof. It's in your attic and mold's growing and you can't see it, you don't know, but it's enough there that can affect your health. So that's something, worth investigating.
Yeah, we have a horror story on that. We bought a new house, or bought a house, and it needed some repairs. We knew when we bought it. But basically, my wife said that she just knew there was a mold problem. She could just feel it. Something was wrong. So we brought in an expert. They came in, and he was really proud to say he was a walking mold detector. If there was mold in the house, he would know, and I'm like, okay, fine. He went up into my attic and, ducked around a little bit and then came out and said, okay, well, you got a moisture problem, but doesn't seem to be any mold. And then he asked about our duct work and said, maybe it's an allergy or issue. He says, when was the last time you had the ducts cleaned? I'm like, well, we just bought the house, so probably never. He says, well, we'll clean the ducts. And so he comes in and cleans the ducts, and, we pay the bill. And 3 days later, one of our bathroom walls is just coated with mold because he had stirred up all these mold spores that were actually in the ducts.
Oh, wow.
And so we had to bring out someone else, and because when we tried calling them, they didn't come back.
Of course.
So we call someone else, and he comes out. And he's like, "Oh my goodness!" He says, "This we've got to pull all this ductwork out." He said, You can't keep this ductwork." And we're like, "Okay." And so he gives me a price on that, and then he starts pulling the ductwork out, and he's like, "Oh, we got a bigger problem." And he said, I picked up the insulation underneath the ducts, and he's like, "There's mold all underneath the ducts that I didn't see before." And I'm like, "Okay, great." So all the insulation, everything cleaned out. Fortunately, it had not gotten into the drywall in the roof or in that bathroom, so they were able to eradicate it. But it was a very expensive problem to have, but it's kind of one of those things where you have to do it right. And it is something that could really, really negatively impact your health. I was less sensitive. Fortunately, my wife was sensitive enough to know something was drastically wrong. To me, if I get a little bit nasally, it's not a big deal. I don't have to think a lot about it, but for her, it was a big deal. And so we did bring someone in, and fortunately we did, because it could have been a much worse problem if we had let it go any longer. So mold is a big, big deal. If you have moisture, live in a moist area similar to the Northeast, not an area where you want to play around. So if you have mold, and if you do find that you have mold, it is something to really, really go ahead and get cleaned up, because it can cause you some massive like Lyme. I know we're here to talk about Lyme, but and sorry to go off on a mold rant, but it can really wreck you too. So if that turns out to be the problem, then really, really get that done.
Well, and Lyme, when people get infected, often it can alter your immune system in a way that you become more hypersensitive to environmental things like mold. I mean, I never really had a mold problem until I got Lyme disease. So I feel like it sensitized me in some way to mold. So mold is really the only allergen that still bothers me today. I mean, I'm not as hypersensitive where I can smell it when I walk in every musty building. Like other people do. But again, that it's something that does have the capacity to really undermine your immune system. So yeah, it's something that if you live certainly in a part of the country where there's a lot of moisture, that should be on your list to at least rule it out as a contributing factor to your overall health. Definitely. Yeah, so the fifth part of the plan is really about lifestyle. And one of the things I see for a lot of people after they get Lyme is that they don't sleep well. And sleep is such an important part of, when your body has an opportunity to restore and repair itself. And we've got a lot of evidence that, the brain repairs itself when you're in that deep restorative sleep. And the more you miss of that, the less opportunity your body has to really recover. And again, I see so many people after they get infected with Lyme, they just don't sleep well. And whether it's difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, and sometimes it's a little bit of both, I outline various things you can do naturally to encourage getting, better sleep, deeper sleep. And the problem with a lot of the sleep medications is that they might put you to sleep, but they don't necessarily get you to that deep sleep, that deep restorative sleep. Whereas I think we have a better job in the natural world of a lot of nutrients and herbs that actually, I think, do a better job of accomplishing that. So sleep is terribly important. I think moving your body is incredibly important. When you're achy and tired, I know when I was in the throes of Lyme, the last thing on my mind was going out and walking or hiking or doing anything really physically active. And it actually took me many years to get to a point where I feel like I could really do it again. But I talk a lot about different strategies that are very gentle and simple and inexpensive that I think, regardless of your physical state, there's something there you can do to get your body moving. Because as you move your body, that's when you move your oxygen, you get more nutrients to the tissue, you get rid of all that inflammatory material. So it might be something as simple as stretching. It could be walking, it could be swimming, it could be yoga, it could be Tai Chi. It's really just a function of what you enjoy, what you have access to, what you feel like you want to do. But I think it's important that people get in the habit of doing something. As humans, we are designed to move, and again, for a lot of people, it really makes a big difference. I mean, I know for myself, I hate yoga with the passion of 1,000 suns, but boy, when I do it, I feel so much better. So, it's one of those things I kind of go reluctantly. I don't particularly enjoy it, but I feel so much better. I can just feel, my body moving and my muscles stretching, and that stiff, tight feeling that so many of us with Lyme experience really dissipates after a good yoga session. So, but it is important to find something you enjoy doing. Otherwise, you're just not going to do it, and that's not the goal either. So find something you like, and just be committed to doing it on a regular basis. And then the last part of all of that is about stress management. And of course, we kind of half jokingly say, well, don't have stress in your life. But, if you live in this country, particularly, there's always stress, and being chronically ill is stressful, and it's stressful for your partner and your spouse and your family. But having an outlet to be able to express that, I think, is very important. And I always felt like I had a good support network. But, at some point, your friends and your family kind of get tired of hearing about the way you feel, and you feel bad about burdening them. And people ask, oh, hey, how you doing today? And you're just nice. And you say, I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. And you don't really want to tell them, no, I feel terrible today, and everything hurts, and my brain's not working. But, having whether it's a Lyme support group or a therapist or, whatever it is that works for you, I think having that place where you can really be honest and discharge the way you feel is important. I have some patients who do it through art, some people who do it through music, some people who do it through a therapist. But having that safe space to be able to, express how you feel and know that it's okay that you're going to have days where you just really feel pretty terrible, and that's okay. And understand that it will pass and it's fleeting, but in the throes of it, it feels pretty horrible. So, we talk so much about the physical aspects of everything Lyme does to your body. We kind of forget about the psycho-emotional aspects, which are significant. Your brain and your body are connected, and what one does, the other follows. So I think as much as we can encourage, positive imagery and happy thoughts, so to speak, it's a way that we can start, helping encourage, better healing in the body. But again, it's the one piece I see with so many Lyme patients that really seems to be missing. And I think it's just an important part of, overall health.
Yeah. And like I said, of the 5, I think there was one that might not apply to everybody, but the other 4, if we're doing those ourselves for our health, we're going to be much better off. So, and I completely agree. And when you get to the lifestyle pieces of, the exercise, the stress reduction, management, and then of course the sleep, those are 3 core health components that we should be focused on trying to improve all the time. So I want to pick your brain while I have you here, because I'll get this question from time to time. There's sleep supplements out there, and they'll be like, should I be taking melatonin? Should I be taking this GABA? I do tell people I take magnesium before I go to bed, and part of the reason I take it is I do have low electrolytes for the most part, so I tend to take electrolytes as a supplement from time to time. And what I found is if I take a magnesium supplement before I go to bed, I get more of that vivid dreaming and kind of feel like I'm really getting into a deeper sleep. And I'm fairly comfortable because magnesium is like I said, it's an electrolyte, it's a mineral. But when we start talking about melatonin and GABA, I think melatonin, because it's kind of I'm not going to say it's a hormone per se, but it is something our body would make by itself. And GABA is something our body has in our brain, but there's questions about whether if you took it orally, how would it get in through the brain-blood barrier? So I guess the question I'll just ask with those, if you don't mind kind of going through, is, are they really doing anything? And is it safe for us to take those on a regular basis? Because, with other hormones, if you sat there and took testosterone, your body's going to quit making testosterone because, well, I got plenty. Same thing with estrogen. Same thing with some of the others. If you're putting it in there, your body's not going to make any because it's just going to know that there's enough there. And I'm not sure that melatonin wouldn't be any different. Can you kind of talk about those? Because those are a topic that I get asked from time to time, and I'll just tell them flat out, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, but since I've got one on the phone, a doctor on the phone, I just thought, okay, let's ask this question. What are your thoughts about melatonin and GABA?
Yeah, well, kind of coming back to your example about hormones, yes, if you take a lot of thyroid hormone or, for women who take estrogen, if you take enough of it, it will actually suppress your normal production. Our hormone systems are built kind of like a thermostat, whereas, your temperature gets to a certain point, it shuts, the heater or the air conditioning off. And the same thing happens in our hormone systems. We don't know that that's necessarily true in our neurotransmitter system, though. So in the case of melatonin is a hormone. And when we talk about supplementing with melatonin, we're really talking about supplementing at normal physiological levels. So we're talking about supplementing at a level would be your normal production, not super physiological doses that's far beyond what your body would normally make. Now, there's some research, particularly in cancer care, that certain tumors, when you take high doses of melatonin, like 20 milligrams or more a night, can actually help stop tumor production. So I know in the cancer world, a lot of naturopathic oncologists are using high doses of melatonin really for stopping tumor growth. But for people who just really have a hard time falling asleep, which is really what melatonin is designed to do. It's really for the people that can't fall asleep. It's not really great for the people who can't stay asleep. So we differentiate when there's a sleep disturbance, whether the issue is falling asleep, staying asleep, or both. But I think melatonin for people who can't fall asleep, when you look at the research, which is generally between 1 and 3 milligrams at night, and certainly for an adult, 3 milligrams is perfectly fine and safe, even with long-term use. I've not read anything that suggests that it suppresses your natural melatonin, nor makes you dependent on it. And I have some people who go on melatonin for a period of time until they get their sleep pattern back on track, and then they're fine and they don't need to take it anymore. I think again, melatonin, without looking at other reasons of why people aren't sleeping well, would be a little bit amiss. Melatonin deficiency is probably not the problem. There's probably something else going on that's interfering with melatonin metabolism. So you got to find out what that thing is, and whether it's stress.
Probably their iPhone is what it probably is. But
well, in all seriousness, we know that we definitely the blue screen that comes off iPhones and iPads does interfere with your sleep pattern. I mean, they've now demonstrated this in research. So, I always tell people that have trouble sleeping, especially, 2 hours before you want to go to bed, you got to cut off your iPhone and iPad.
I cannot get my wife to do that to save my life.
Well, we've all become a very addicted society to our electronics. And of course, I think it's practical too, because by the time you get done with your workday, you cook dinner, you clean up, you get your kids to bed, that's the time you now have to yourself to answer email and do that. And so many of us, that's our quiet time. But unfortunately, that timing's terrible because, again, that blue screen. Now, again, they make glasses that you can buy online that block that blue light. So for people who insist that they have to do that work late in the evening, go spend the $10 and get the blue blockers that blocks that blue light, and it's going to certainly help with your sleep pattern. But melatonin, again, is really designed for people who can't fall asleep. For people who can't stay asleep, this is where I think GABA actually works pretty well. But you're right, there are some forms of GABA that don't get absorbed very well across the gut wall. So there are a couple of forms of GABA that have been studied that shows that they do actually cross the blood-brain barrier. So I particularly use one called Pharma-GABA, and there's a few supplement companies that make that particular type. But Pharma-GABA clinically seems to work really well for people in keeping them staying asleep. And there's another one that's a liposomal form of GABA that also seems to get absorbed fairly well. So, but if you're just buying regular GABA off the counter that's not in one of those forms, it probably won't work very well. The other nutrient that I like a lot of is called glycine. Glycine is the most basic amino acid, and it binds to a specific part of the brain called the locus coeruleus, which nobody cares about, but it's the actual part of the brain that's sort of the on-off switch between excitatory neurotransmitters and the ones that make you calm and quiet. And so by binding to that part of the brain, it basically flips the switch and helps the brain quiet down and starts inducing more of your sedative neurotransmitters like serotonin and so forth. So glycine is very safe. It's very cheap. And, you can take 3,000 milligrams of glycine before bedtime. And often people report that they feel like they get a deeper, more restorative sleep. And you mentioned magnesium. Magnesium is the one nutrient you burn through the fastest in your body. And certainly if you're a physically active person, you'll burn through magnesium faster. So magnesium is a cofactor in a lot of neurotransmitter metabolism. So I think just sort of feeding those pathways probably helps induce better sleep. And again, a lot of my patients do tell me that they sleep better when they take more magnesium. So again, if you get too much magnesium, you'll know it'll actually give you loose stool. But I have some people who take 500, 600, 800 milligrams a day and actually do very well with it.
Okay. Well, again, Doctor, it has been so cool talking to you. The name of the book is The Lyme Solution. If someone wanted to learn more about you, get a copy of the book, or just learn more about Lyme disease, where would you like for me to send them?
Yeah, if they just go to my website, it's dariningles.nd.com. That's DarinIngelsND.com. We've got a lot of great information about Lyme disease, the book, and we love for people to follow us and get that information.
Cool. Well, this is going to be episode 322. So you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/322, and you'll find a link to Dr. Ingles' website right there. So again, Dr. Ingles, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Great. Thanks, Alan.
Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Janet Newman and discuss her book, Living in the Chemical Age. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.